as an indigenous person, this is very personal to me. As Daryl Marks, this reclaimed water is super important to me. I think about, where is that reclaimed water coming from? Yes, it's coming from the sewage that's being piped out of the city into these containers, right? And is processed. But where is that water coming from? So I think about every time somebody flushes the toilet, washes their hands. I think about every time it rains and the water pushes through the streets and cleans the streets out and pushes it into the ground, into the sewage system. I also think about, like, where are all these chemicals that people talk about? These hormones, where are those coming from? And I think about the hospitals, they have drains. There was campaigns that said, if you're not using your medication, flush it. How do you separate all of that from the water now? Just a couple of years ago, I lost my youngest brother. He was living here in Flagstaff with his family, and his heart stopped. I remember the phone call my mom gave me and said, you need to come over, your brother's gone. Came over to the house. She said, you need to call the medical examiners. I need this, this, and this done. So the first thing she said to me is, tell them not to do anything to his body. Now, if you're familiar with how coroners work, when somebody passes away, they do an examination to determine the cause of death. So they were ready to open up my brother and probe through his body and find out why. In Navajo culture, as is the same with indigenous cultures, multiple indigenous cultures around the world, you're not supposed to harm your body. The way that you're brought into this world is the same way that you're supposed to go out. And that was my mother's belief. That's our belief. She wanted her baby to go back to the earth the same way she brought him into the world. So I had to call the medical examiner and say, don't do anything to his body. They're like, but Mr. Marks, we need to know what was the cause of death. What happened? Don't you need to know that? And I said, no. As a family, we know that his heart stopped, and that's all that we need to know. And they say, but Mr. Marks, you might not be able to get the medical benefits or this or that. And we were like, we'll take that risk. We just don't want you to do anything else to his body. In fact, what did you do to this point? And they said, well, part of the process we do is we remove the clothing and we wash the body. I said, stop what you're doing. You've caused enough harm already. And they said, I'm sorry, I don't understand. What did you do with his clothing? Oh, we're going to incinerate it. Don't do that. Put it aside. We'll take care of it. Okay, but we've cleaned his body and we can do this. And we're like, no, don't do any more. Just, we'll go to the funeral home. We'll make arrangements. Just bring him there in the same way that you have him right now. Don't do anything further. Now, the purpose of all of that discussion and something that maybe is aside, when my mother gave birth to my brother and we held him for the first time, he had his own smell. Every day of his life as a child, as a baby, he had his own smell. Now, sometimes that smell changed when we took those chemicals, the baby shampoo, whatever, we washed him off, and then he smelled like those chemicals. But after a while, he started to smell like a baby again, smell like him. In Navajo, we talk about that as being like the essence of your life, that sweat, that perspiration that comes off of you. There's a reason I wear this headband, because as a Navajo male, I'm not supposed to allow my sweat to fall violently to the earth because she's female. So my brother's essence was washed off of his body and it went down the sewage. It is now a part of that effluent water that's being sprayed, that's being put on this mountain. It's desecrating this mountain. Because now for my family, when we think about my brother, when we buried him, part of him was already missing. but yet his essence is being sprayed not only on this mountain but on other places where reclaimed water gets sprayed. So my family has to live with that. The fact that my mom's baby, part of him, is being sprayed on that mountain, and people are disrespecting that. There's no care put into how that reclaimed water is being sprayed on that mountain, that snow is being put there. I'm not going to go running around and skiing or dancing or driving around or building a playground on top of a cemetery. I'm not going to go into anybody's church and do that very same thing, but yet this church, my church, the church of 14 different tribes, that's being done. People are going up there and desecrating and disrespecting that space. All for what? Money. Capitalism. The very same thing that's going to doom our children's future, because nobody's thinking about the impacts of what's happening to the water. Nobody's thinking about what's happening to the environment. They're just worried about how much money they're going to make this season. My ask, my personal ask, is that for Arizonans to respect this space, respect this mountain, so that indigenous tribes can continue to do the same thing, reciprocate that respect back.